It was late afternoon in a small, cozy town diner where the warm hum of conversation mixed with the soft clinking of plates. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted through the air, and the sunlight filtered in through the windows, casting golden lines across the tables. In one of the corner booths sat a woman named Sarah, her shoulders slightly hunched, her eyes tired but gentle. Across from her was her little girl, Emily, no more than 5 years old, full of quiet innocence, her big brown eyes wandering curiously around the room. Their clothes were clean but old, their hands were washed but rough. There was dignity in their simplicity, but also an unspoken weight that clung to them like a shadow. Sarah held a small menu, though she didn't need it. She already knew she couldn't afford much. She had come there because Emily had been asking, just a small wish, "Mama, can we eat somewhere nice today, like other kids?" And Sarah, with her heart full though her pockets empty, said yes. But now, as she looked at the prices, her heart began to sink. The cheapest thing still felt like a mountain she couldn't climb. Emily, however, wasn't thinking about the prices. Her gaze had locked onto a plate of warm roasted chicken and buttery vegetables placed in front of a man, sitting alone at the next table. The man, James, was in his mid-30s, wearing a simple shirt with sleeves rolled up. A hard-working man, perhaps a mechanic or a carpenter, hands marked by labor, but eyes carrying a warmth that suggested kindness ran deeper than his tired days. He noticed Emily's eyes, but he didn't smile or react right away. Instead, he continued cutting his food slowly, observing quietly, thoughtfully. Sarah leaned forward and whispered, "Don't stare." "Sweetheart." Emily looked down immediately, tiny fingers curling in her lap. "I'm sorry, Mama." It wasn't hunger in her voice, not exactly. It was longing. Sarah stood and approached the counter to place the smallest possible order, 1 slice of toast and a cup of water. She said it softly to avoid anyone hearing. But James heard. He heard her voice. He heard the quiet, trembling embarrassment. He saw how she placed her last few coins on the counter and pressed her hands together like she was hoping it would somehow be enough. The waitress hesitated, eyes softening. She looked as though she wanted to help, but her boss was watching. Rules were rules. Sarah returned to the table, smiling at her daughter with the kind of smile only a mother could craft, one that tries to hide pain like clouds hiding the sun. "We'll share it, sweetheart. Just something small to enjoy together." Emily nodded, but her eyes lifted once more to the plate of food next to them. James exhaled softly, as if this decision inside him made itself before he even thought it through. He raised his hand for the waitress. A few moments later, the waitress came to Sarah's table, carrying 2 full plates of warm food, steaming chicken, vegetables, soft bread, and fresh fruit slices for Emily. Sarah blinked, confused. "Sorry, we didn't order." The waitress smiled gently and gestured toward James. "It's already paid." Sarah turned to him, confused, emotional, overwhelmed. "No, please, we can't accept." Her voice wavered, the walls she had learned to hold up for years suddenly trembling. James looked at her calmly. "You didn't take anything from me. I gave it." "There's a difference." Emily's eyes widened, sparkling like morning dew. "Mama, we can eat?" Sarah's lip quivered. She whispered, only loud enough for Emily to hear, "Yes, baby, we can eat." But her heart was fighting back tears, tears of gratitude, relief, and maybe a little grief for how rare moments like this had become. They ate slowly. Emily giggled, and James simply continued eating quietly, as though this was nothing special at all. When they finished, Sarah walked over to him, hands trembling slightly. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just don't stop believing there are good people left in this world." Sarah took a breath, nodding, swallowing the emotion that threatened to overflow. But then, as she turned to leave, she paused. Somehow she knew this wasn't the end of the story. Somehow her life had just shifted a little, like a door quietly opening without sound. She took Emily's hand, and they left the diner together. But the weight she carried felt lighter now, like someone, somewhere, had reminded her she wasn't invisible. She didn't know James's name yet, But fate was already weaving their paths together in ways neither of them could predict. Days passed, then weeks, and the memory of that quiet afternoon stayed with Sarah like a warm light she kept it, tucked inside her heart. Life did not magically become easy. There were still bills she struggled to pay, groceries that needed to stretch further than they should, and long nights where she lay awake planning how to make tomorrow possible. But something had changed, not in her circumstances but in her spirit. She felt seen in a world that often pretended not to notice. She carried that day in her heart like a lighthouse, small, but bright enough to show direction when everything else felt dark. And little Emily, whenever she passed the diner on their walk home from school, would look through the window with a soft smile, remembering the meal that felt like joy. She did not remember hunger or shame, only kindness and warmth. Meanwhile, James continued his life quietly. He never told anyone about the day he paid for their meal. He did not consider it a grand gesture. He saw it the way some might see lending a hand to someone who stumbled, not heroic, simply human. Yet he thought about the little girl with the soft eyes and the woman who tried to leave without asking for help. Something about their dignity stayed with him. One cold morning, as autumn began to settle in, Sarah lost her job. The small shop where she worked decided to cut staff to save money, and she was one of the first to go. She stood outside the shop holding her last paycheck envelope, staring at the sky that suddenly felt heavier. She felt that familiar sinking, that cold dread that came when the world felt too big and unkind. She held Emily's hand tighter that day, walking slower than usual, unsure how she would fix things this time. Days turned into 2 weeks. Savings disappeared. The electricity bill came closer. The landlord's warning note slipped under the door like a threat, and the grocery bag became lighter and lighter. But Sarah did not break. She stitched hope together as best she could, telling Emily stories at night about sunrises and flowers and happy endings because she refused to let the world steal her daughter's innocence. Still, she cried silently when Emily was asleep. One evening, as the sky turned orange and the air smelled like late autumn leaves, Sarah passed by the diner again. She didn't intend to go inside. She couldn't, but Emily tugged her sleeve softly. "Mama, can we just sit and smell the food? We don't have to eat." The words pierced something deep. Sarah knelt down quickly and hugged her, tears burning the back of her throat, but she blinked them away. "No, sweetheart. If we step inside anywhere, it will be to eat, not to pretend." As they turned to leave, a voice came from behind them. "Is everything all right?" They turned, and there was James, wearing the same quiet kindness in his eyes. He had just finished his shift at the workshop nearby and was passing by. Sarah tried to smile. "Yes, we're okay. Just going home." But he saw the small grocery bag with only bread inside. He saw the exhaustion hidden carefully. He saw the courage holding her together by threads. "Come inside," he said softly, not as an offer but as a gentle invitation to rest. "Please." Sarah hesitated, but this time it was Emily who nodded. "Just for a little," she whispered. They sat at the same booth they had sat in that first day, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since then. James didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask why or how. He just ordered 3 warm meals, simple but filling. They talked, not about problems, not about struggle, but about simple things. Emily told him about her drawings. Sarah told him about how she used to sing before life became loud. James told them about how he fixed engines, because he liked making broken things work again. There was a warmth at the table that had nothing to do with food. It was the warmth of being understood without needing to explain. When they finished and prepared to leave, James quietly slipped an envelope across the table. "This isn't charity," he said gently, seeing the protest already forming in her eyes. "I don't want anything back. It's just, sometimes life hits hard all at once, and it's okay to take a breath." Inside the envelope was not just money. It was a note, handwritten, simple and steady. "The world hasn't forgotten you." Sarah's hands trembled. Tears she had held behind iron walls began to fall freely, not of shame, but of relief. of release, of finally not having to be strong alone. Emily leaned into her mother, hugging her tight. And James just sat quietly, letting the moment be what it needed to be. Some kindness does not need recognition. It just needs to be given. From that day on, life did not magically fix itself, but doors began to open. Sarah found work again at a community center that needed someone gentle and understanding. Emily grew strong, bright and kind, her heart shaped by the compassion she had been shown. And James continued living his steady life, fixing what was broken, not just engines, but sometimes hearts too, without ever calling it that. Sometimes the people who save us do so quietly. Sometimes the miracles we pray for come in the form of someone simply noticing. Sometimes the most life-changing moments happen over a plate of warm food and a gaze full of quiet hope. And years later, when Emily was old enough to understand hunger and dignity and love, and the bravery of her mother, she would tell the story not of the day they were needy, but of the day someone reminded them they were worth helping.